10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 212. Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is somewhat of a bonus episode. Every once in a while we do get those months that have 5 Fridays in them, and this happens to be one of those months. And actually I got a great email from one of our listeners talking about how much they enjoyed this series on articulation, and they reminded me that I haven't done anything about the ghost note. So I decided to remedy that and do kind of a 5th episode on this topic and talk about ghost notes this week. So thank you for reminding me. And I think this is one really important thing that can really take your playing to the next level. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First, I want to thank some people that have joined up to our Patreon this week. If you don't know, Patreon is a great way to support the podcast and get all of the materials that we put out in return. It really is the thing that keeps us going, keeps the show coming at you week after week. So we've got some new patrons, and I want to say thank you. Thank you to Oliver, Marion, and Carol. And we've also had a couple of people actually edit their pledges up to $5 a month. So I want to thank them as well. That's really, really kind of you. Thank you to Robert and John for going from $3 a month to $5 a month. That is an option if you feel strongly enough about the benefits that you're getting. You could give us that $5 a month, and that helps even more. So thank you to them. If you want to jump on Patreon, start getting all of the PDFs that go along with all of these episodes, you could do that by going to the 10minutejazzlesson.com and clicking on one of the Patreon banners, getting yourself signed up, and you get instant access to all those materials. All right, so let's jump into today's episode. Why talk about ghosting? Ghosting is really, really important. And basically what it is, the definition that I give to it, is picking certain notes in a jazz line, especially at faster tempos, that we are going to give much less emphasis to for 2 reasons. It really helps with the texture of the line when all of the notes aren't speaking at the exact same strength and the exact same volume. It's kind of like when I'm speaking to you. Every word that I say does not have the same emphasis on it. I am accenting certain notes. I'm emphasizing certain notes to kind of make my point. And you can think about playing a jazz line the same way. Every note is not created equal. There's going to be some that stick out. It's like when we were talking about accents on one of the past episodes of the podcast. You know, one of the ways that we make jazz lines swing is by accenting that offbeat. We're saying that these notes are more important accent-wise than the ones that we're putting on the beat. So it's the same, it's kind of the same concept, but there are some notes that we almost want to swallow. It's almost like they're implied instead of being heard. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, the second thing is it actually makes lines easier to play. Again, like I said, at fast tempos. It's really, really difficult sometimes to give equal emphasis to each note because the lines jump large distances or do other things that really make it kind of difficult to just sort of hammer each note with equal emphasis. So those are kind of the 2 reasons that we want to learn about ghost notes and start to use them in our playing. Now let's start to talk about what notes we should ghost. So just like anything in jazz, it's kind of hard to put an overarching rule on this, but I'm going to try to give some suggestions that will allow you to investigate each line and figure out, exactly what notes you want to ghost. But remember, this kind of depends on the line. It kind of depends on what you want to sound like almost like everything else that we talk about on this show. So you're going to have to do some digging for yourself. Now, what I've done is I've prepared a PDF for you this week with 3 example lines, and we're going to talk about which notes we're going to ghost. So if we look at the first line on the PDF, we're going to talk about one of the first concepts I use for ghosting. And that is anytime a line makes a drastic interval shift, so a large interval shift, and particularly going down. Now, on wind instruments in particular, this can really be one of the toughest parts of a line is when we have a large interval jump, and naturally we will ghost it a little bit because it's just hard to get that note that's very far away from the note that we're coming from. It's hard to get that at full volume, and it results in kind of a natural ghosting. But we're going to try to do it on purpose and see what it does for the line. It's going to make it just sound a lot smoother, and it's going to give it a particular characteristic that we like when we play jazz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the first line, the first 3 measures on your sheet. I'm going to play it with equal emphasis on each note. And then I'm going to play it a second time using these ghost notes. And what I've done on the PDF is I've put the notes that I want you to ghost in parentheses. And that's generally how ghost notes are notated most of the time. So let's hear the difference in the first line between no ghosting and ghosting. And you're going to notice that all those notes that are ghosted are going to be occurring after a large interval jump going down. Let's check it out. Now, what you're going to notice is there's not that big of a difference. It's really subtle, right? But this can make all the difference when you're playing at a fast tempo and you're trying to convey a line that needs just a little bit less of that accent on those ghosted notes. So the second line on your PDF demonstrates sort of the second rule with ghosting. Generally, what I think about is the lowest notes in a phrase are going to be the ones that I'm generally going to play as ghosted eighth notes. So that's kind of the second overriding principle, if you may, about what notes to ghost. And, you know, I say all this, I'm trying to give you rules, but really it's going to come from studying, just like everything else in jazz, studying the masters that came before us, sort of figuring out where they ghost notes, and then trying to form principles around that. And generally, this is what I hear from a lot of people like Charlie Parker and some of the innovators of bebop, that they're ghosting the lowest notes in a phrase. So if we look at example number 2, you'll notice that the lowest note in each measure is going to be consistently ghosted. And this is over a 2-5-1 in the key of C. So let me play exercise number 2 for you and really try to hear how I'm slightly ghosting those low notes in each phrase. So you hear the added texture that it gives to the line. That's another really big advantage to this concept, is that it adds just a little bit of extra texture, makes the lines more interesting, and it also makes them easier. So kind of a win-win there. Whatever we can do to make a fast line a little bit simpler for us to play and make it sound better at the same time, that is something that I feel is a huge advantage to our playing. All right, let's take a look at the very last line. And this kind of combines both things. I have a lot of large jumps, and I am also ghosting each of the lowest notes in each measure. So it's a combination of both principles, and I really think it helps the texture of this line. This is a really tough line to play on saxophone or a wind instrument. So this is kind of a natural example of how I would handle a line like this. Again, I have the parentheses around the notes that I'm thinking about ghosting, and it definitely helps the texture. Here we go. Here's exercise number 3. And I think you could probably hear when I'm playing that at the faster tempo the second time, it really comes into sharp focus what I'm doing to ghost the notes, both because I have to when the tempo is fast, and this concept just works better when you're sort of cranking at a fast tempo. So that's about it. Hopefully, this was useful to you. I wanted to just do one more episode. Since we have these 5 episodes this month, I just wanted to do one last thing. And I can't believe I forgot to talk about ghosted notes. Such an important concept. But hopefully, this can get you started. If you have any questions, drop them in the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. That is the best way to get in touch with me, and you'll get a lot of other fantastic answers from other people in the community that has really blossomed into quite the place to hang out with the listeners of this show. And I appreciate all of you. So if you want to grab the PDFs for this episode, remember, go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up, $3 a month, and you get all the PDFs, a lot of other fantastic benefits as well. And I sincerely thank you if you choose to do that. That really is what keeps the show going. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you next week with some brand new episodes. Have a good one. Bye.